What is the difference between static testing and dynamic testing? So let me tell you, the testing are of two types: the static testing in software and dynamic testing. In the static testing, we don't run the code actually. We do the reviews, we go for the walkthroughs and the inspection. That is, there is a technical team or your head or some assigned authority who will look after the reviews, walkthrough and inspection. So that is a quality control method. And in the dynamic testing, the code is actually run. The program is actually run. So it can be functional, it can be non-functional. In functional testing, we have unit testing. That is, if you make a code or a function or a module, that will be unit testing, testing of that module. Combine the module, that will make an integration testing. And then finally, when you have the subsystems, etc., the other partners of that software combined together, then the final testing will be the system testing. So in non-functional testing, there are certain parameters which may not be in SRS or not explicitly mentioned. So that has to be, measured, or that has to be tested, like performance testing, like, stress testing, load testing, security testing. There are so many. It depends totally on the application you are making. So this is a whole structure of the testing. And let me just go into the detail of this dynamic testing. We have black box testing and white box testing. In white box testing, the functional testing and non-functional testing are there. In white box testing, we have the data flow and control testing. That is, you need to know the code. And for that, we actually devise the plan, because the cyclomatic complexity is computed and then this number of test cases are devised. In the functional testing, as I told you already, you have one more testing called user acceptance testing. Non-functional testing, performance, usability, compatibility, recovery, and the security testing. There's many more. So in static testing and dynamic testing, what are the difference? See, static testing is done without executing the program. You don't execute the program. No execution, no running. Dynamic testing, this is done by executing the program. So static testing is a kind of verification process, and dynamic testing is a validation process. So for example, whatever you are doing, that is, at every software development life cycle phase, for example, you are making 2 plus 3 and this is being checked if it is equal to 5. This is verification. But you have done 2 plus 3 equals 5. It is okay. But the user didn't wanted it. User wanted 2 minus 3. So that is done at the validation. Validation is against the SRS, software requirement specification. So the static testing, it is about prevention of the defects. So what we do here is we review, we walk through, we inspect. And dynamic testing is all about, why we are doing it. We need to find out the bugs, the problems. And when the problems are coming, we need to fix it. That is, the debugging has to be done. So static testing is about prevention of the defect. It is a preventive kind of, say approach. So a kind of a quality assurance aspect. And dynamic testing is a quality control kind of aspect. So different phases are there. That is the SRS when you make, then you make the design description, then you make the next level, that is the coding. For that you make validation, verification, and the user documentation. All these needs to be checked. For example, SRS needs to be checked for correctness, for ambiguity, for traceability. So all these can be only done using reviews, walkthroughs, and inspections. Especially the technical reviews have to be done. So these test cases what we write also has to be tested. That is done in static testing. In dynamic testing, now you are about to run the program. When you run the program, that is compile time, mostly the problems comes up, and most of the time the runtime, because there is resource, there is memory, there are so many things comes at the runtime. The static testing gives an assessment of code and documentation, and mainly the documentation, because the code is just 10% to 20% of the part of whole software development lifecycle. Most of the thing is your requirement gathering, then you are making of the requirement, and then depending upon the requirement you have to make the design, and then with the help of the design you are actually going to code, and then you have to test. So test cases have to be written, test plan, test strategy have to be devised. So the documentation are very important. and apart from them the deliverables also have to be checked. That is done in static testing. The dynamic testing gives bugs and bottlenecks in the software system. That is, when you run it, then you come up with the problems and then you try to find it out. Either way, black box or white box. So static testing, if you have done it properly, then most of the defects are covered here only. They will be uncovered here and they will not propagate to the dynamic testing. So static testing involves checklisting. There are certain process, there are certain standards which needs to be followed, and that is checked. That an organization has certain, say, software quality assurance plan. And for example, you are being told you have to follow IEEE 12207. And there are templates being given to you. Okay, this is the way you have to write the design. So if some errors are there, some problems are there, that will be taken care in the static testing part. Dynamic testing, that whatever test cases has been done, that is in the documentation part, then the test strategy, test plan, test cases all needs to be done, and this has to be actually executed for the path coverage, for the logical conditional aspect, so that no problem comes when it actually runs with the system. So we normally do the complexity, McCabe complexity, that is the upper bound of the number of test cases that can come. So those test cases are being made, and on those test cases each coverage has to be established, and that is run on the software. So static testing, as I said, you do it right from the inception of your project or software. That is done every time. All the deliverables, all the baselines are covered. Dynamic testing is always done after compilation. That is, once you are done, you are knowing, okay, this unit is complete, then you do the the boundary value analysis, you do the equivalence partitioning. These are the black box testing methods. And then the control flow testing, the data flow testing, that is the white box process. So that is you do in the dynamic testing part. So finally, when you are actually executing the software, when you are actually running the system, software, or whichever name you give, then you have to do it. So in static testing, if you have made a design, then what is the coupling? Is the design collaborating, or collaboration is good, the interfacing are good? That is checked in static testing. So static testing covers the structural and statement coverage testing. See, this is not the actual testing. You are not running the software, but you have the flowchart, you have the UML diagrams, you have the procedural, the definition language, you have the say the flowchart, the activity diagrams. All these can be tested, through walkthrough, reviews, and inspection. In dynamic testing, it covers the executable file of the code. So cost of finding defects and fixing is less, because if there is a problem in SRS, if you actually catch the problem in requirement specification and the design specification, then most of the problems which are going to peep in, that are going to propagate in the coding part, that can be stopped. That can be fixed as early as possible, because once you make a software, you are about to deploy, you are doing the test before that, then it may be a problem, because the cost will be very high at that time, because you need to go back and do the changes in the design, and that will be a very costly affair as far as dynamic testing is concerned. Both the testing are done. They are very important. Both the testings are very important. And as I said, they are the main core of the testing. Other testings come inside that, right? Like the dynamic testing has function, non-functional, but it is the core.